Hello and welcome to this video. The purpose of this video is to help mentors to achieve their potential. My name is Juliet Sabo-Moju. I'm from Strive Higher, a small consultancy in the HE sector. The CUBO scheme has been initiated to provide an opportunity, a unique opportunity for all of our members to take part in unlocking potential of others. Over the course of the next few months, you'll have an opportunity to unlock the potential of some incredible future leaders in our network. It'll be a great opportunity to build capability across the network, particularly given how much change the sector is going through, a real opportunity for us to embrace change. Creating a learning culture is really at the heart of all of that. It's also an opportunity for you to give back to our community. So let's think about how you get yourself set up as a mentor. Well, there's 3 steps really. It's actually quite straightforward. First of all, setting up your profile. You'll be asked to provide some information that will go onto the website for the CUBO mentoring scheme. This will include your expertise, it will include your experience, and it will also include your availability. So as in, it's typically 9 to 12 months for a mentoring relationship to take part. And the meetings, the sessions would normally be about every 6 to 8 weeks. So just confirming when you're going to be available and confirming that you can be available for that period of time. And then all of the information will create your profile. Mentees will look at the various different profiles, and if they decide that your profile is appropriate, they will get in contact. Now, them deciding which mentor to go with really comes down to which area of experience and expertise that they'd really like to be able to develop. So that needs assessment process will take place for them. Should they decide to reach out to you, then you'll be contacted to have a chemistry session. Now, this has 2 functions really. Firstly, for you to have an opportunity to kind of understand what it is they're looking to develop around and whether your experience and your expertise is appropriate. But also it's an opportunity for both of you to kind of check that there's good energy and that you think that you could work well together. Once you've done that, it's then really about clarifying that there's a really, really great focus for the mentoring relationship to progress with, that you're both on the same page around which areas of expertise and which areas of excellence and experience that they'd like to be able to develop. Once that's done, the final step before you move into actually beginning the mentoring conversations is the mentoring agreement, the 3 C's. So confidentiality. Anything that's discussed in the mentoring sessions stays there and is never kind of shared with anybody outside of it at any point in time. Conduct. So here you might talk about, lateness and etiquette around some of that and, cancelling or rescheduling. Anything that relates to how you want to be with one another to make the most of the relationship. And then finally, just looking at calendars from a very practical perspective, looking at over the 9 to 12 months, perhaps even putting the sessions in the diary every 6 to 8 weeks, talking a little bit about whether you're going to do them face-to-face or virtually, all of that so that it's a practical and workable relationship to move forward with. Once you've done that, you can get started. Let me just talk a little bit about this idea around the profile. And many people will say to me, well, I'm not sure what I have to offer. For sure, you will have something to offer, absolutely. Whether you're fairly early on in your career or whether you're more advanced in your career, you will have something valuable to bring, whether it's fresh eyes or it's experienced eyes onto a mentoring situation. So we've tried to clarify this by saying, well, it could actually be about the sector. It could be about you having a really good understanding of the sector. Perhaps you've worked in more than one university, so you can compare, for example, Russell Group and Post-92s. Or perhaps you've actually worked just in one university, but you've got a really good understanding over a period of time as to the dynamics and some of the key kind of questions and concerns relating to policy and the regulatory framework that surround the HE sector, because it is a very specific sector. You can imagine people coming from the corporate sector, they could learn huge amounts from you just from you having been in the sector for quite some time. But perhaps it's about expertise. Perhaps you've done some IWFM qualifications or other qualifications, or perhaps through the course of your work, you've developed like a really deep knowledge and expertise in particular aspects of what you do. Perhaps it's about experience, about on the job. Sometimes some of the hardest, scariest experiences we have in the workplace can give us a really valuable set of experiences that we can share from other people. Always as well, it could be about excellence. It could be about certain skills that you've developed. It could be about certain ways of working that you've developed. over the course of your career that you know has really kind of set you apart, something that you've been able to really use to great effect. With all of this, your game-changing strengths, your experience, your expertise, your excellence, and your sector knowledge will be really core to your identity, really core to who you are. And it will be the things that define you, and it will be the things that you've been able to really use to affect in ways that you feel quite proud, and ways that you feel that you can speak for some, to others from a position of confidence and pride, I guess. So thinking that through and being able to capture that and bring that to life in your profile is going to be really, really helpful. The more that you can speak with confidence and be quite descriptive in that profile, the easier it is for mentees to be able to understand their own goals, but also to match their own goals with profiles as well. So some of the best practice, I've been very lucky to mentor lots of people myself, but also be mentored by some amazing mentors. And I've also worked with mentors quite a lot, and who talk to me about what they've said, is the best practice, things that have worked really, really well for them. So here they are: the process, the challenge, and the support. Starting with process, it's key that you set up the relationship for success. So having real clarity around what it is they're looking to develop and why that matters before you get started, so that you can really get some momentum going. You can really start to get to the heart of some of the key issues early on. And of course, with that, doing so where there's confidentiality and where you've got the right sort of relationship set up, the 3 C's. And then in terms of the actual sessions themselves, managing the process of the sessions. So starting each of the sessions, getting them to look back and think about what did they apply from the last time that you spent your time with them, what were the insights and how have they been able to experiment and use that, or any further reflection since the last session. So doing that gets them in the right headspace, but it also really emphasizes the importance of acting on what they're learning, not just having a nice chat. Like, nice chats are lovely, but it is about transferring learning, applying it in the workplace, and then finishing each session with what are their key takeaways? What have they thought about today that they hadn't thought about before? What are the key actions? What can they now do and take forward before you next meet? Again, that reinforces ownership. It reinforces the importance of applying the learning, which is absolutely key. All of that kind of leads us nicely into the piece around challenge. And as a mentor, you are there to help them to step outside their comfort zone. You've been there before, so you can share with them and understand some of the challenges they might have. So you're able to really nudge them to think about what it is they're really trying to achieve, how far away that is, so how ambitious are they being around what they're wanting to achieve. And you're really asking them really powerful questions about how they're going to get there, what's the nature of the issue, and what support they're going to need, for example, from a manager back in the workplace or others in the workplace, in order to achieve what it is they're trying to achieve. But at the same time, with all of that nudging and encouraging, you're also providing lots of support. So you're providing reassurance that this is a safe place, that you understand the journey that they're on, and you know how difficult it is. At the same time, you talk about your own failures. You talk about how you've bounced back from some of those failures, and how you've grown from those failures as well. And as well, many people, when they are trying to do something new, often they focus more on where they have gaps than actually on where they're making progress and where they're actually achieving small successes. So another important part of that maintaining the support is for you to be upbeat and to be really championing the efforts and the progress that they're putting into this. So some best practice from some of the most powerful and impressive mentors I've ever been lucky enough to work with. Here's Melissa, and she's talking about how she's been able to get the right balance between challenge and support in mentoring relationships.
I love mentors who would tell me not just the good stuff. They're actually 60% of the conversation was talking about their failings.
Yeah.
Because their failings would actually give me ideas. They would help me to sometimes avoid pitfalls and etc., and help me to navigate. So mentors who show their vulnerability. that showed that actually they're like all of us. They had things they were proud of, they had things they were still working on, things that they failed on.
As a mentor, you're going to be, no doubt, getting to know the individual you're working with, the mentee, over a course of weeks. And within those weeks, within each of those sessions, you're going to get more of a sense of what's the most helpful approach for you to take at a given point in time in order to nudge them, give them the right amount of challenge, but also provide the right amount of support. And a very traditional approach to mentoring is there on the left-hand side. Probably a traditional approach to mentoring would be that you're the font of all knowledge because you've done it before and you know the shortcuts. So there may be times when actually taking a more traditional approach might be appropriate to give instructions, to give advice, to give suggestions. But equally, in any given session, there's always definitely going to be a time when you actually want to be much further down the right-hand end of that spectrum, where you're listening in a non-judgmental, safe space. You're just listening. You might at times then shift from there to be more around questioning, to get them to explore and examine a little bit more. You might be actually wanting to reflect it back to them so they hear what they're saying and they actually kind of take some learning from that. But also you might be wanting to use things like paraphrasing and summarizing as you nudge them to taking new and different actions. So you will, as a mentor, need to be really flexible and have all of these tools in your back pocket, as if you like, when you go into a mentoring conversation. Being really present, being able to be really focused on where they are and how much confidence they have and how you can build that confidence will be key to deciding whether actually giving advice or actually just listening and asking questions is the right thing to do. So staying in that space of being able to really challenge people and support people and ask the right questions and make the right choices at a certain point in time. Just wanted to briefly touch on the GROW model. The GROW model is often used in coaching, but also really powerful in mentoring as well. You can use it in a couple of ways. You can use it as a questioning framework. So down the right hand side of that spectrum, where you're asking quite targeted, quite focused questions to get people to think in new and interesting ways. But you can also just use it generally as a framework for the conversation. In any mentoring conversation you have, you're going to be focusing at some point around the goal. And you might need to keep bringing them back to the goal. Where do they want to be by the end of this mentoring relationship? Or where do they want to be in 5 years' time? And why is that so important to them? And how will they know when they've got to that goal? So in any single session, you might need to keep going back to that goal and get them to think about where they are in relation to that goal. So reality is all about where they are. What are the key issues? What's the impact of the current status quo? Who's impacted by it? What are the biggest barriers that they're facing at this point in time? So you can use these questions as a framework for really getting them to understand their current situation, understand the dynamics, the drivers, the barriers, and then you can get them to think about the options. Probably you need to have thought about where you're trying to get to goal and understood the reality before you can really feasibly evaluate any options, at least. Anyway, you can probably generate some, but you can't necessarily evaluate them if you haven't thought about goal and reality. So you get to that point where you get them to think about what options they have, which ones are most likely to get them closer to the goal. What would happen, if they weren't afraid? What would happen if they just went for it? So really trying to kind of challenge them to think a bit differently. And then finishing off with willingness. What's the first thing they're going to do? Yeah, how confident are they on a scale of 1 to 10? If it's a 5, what would make it a 7? What would make it a 10? So again, a bit of a framework for moving them to a place where they're ready to take action, apply the learning as a mentee. A lovely framework. The best mentors will have their own ways of using different approaches and using different questioning frames in order to bring out the best in others. This is one I hope it's useful for all of you. Again, I've spoken to a few mentors to understand from their experience what works really well, what are the top tips they have for mentors as well. So let's hear from Joe first.
Listen. I think the most important thing is, as someone who talks too much, which I certainly do, I like to talk. I think take time and listen to what the person is saying and what they want and what they actually want.
And let's hear from Rebecca.
So listening skills, I think, are highly important and probably underrated at times. And it's a skill, right? You have to sit there and become aware of yourself if you're talking over that person or you're interrupting too much. So those people who've been wonderful listeners, who've sat down, who've taken notes, who've remembered things I talked about from previous conversations and asked about that and really shown that they care about how things have gone for you, have been phenomenal for me and what I've taken into every role since.
Brilliant. So how do you actually know when you're done? You know, you come to the point where you've maybe done your 6 to 8 sessions. Well, the best way to make sure that you're ready to be able to conclude that mentoring relationship is by actually scheduling the last session as just a review session. So nothing new comes into that, but you take the time to look at progress, to really assess where they came in, where they've got to now, what they've taken from it, what they're pleased with, what they would like to really take forward independently of you in the future as well. I think it's lovely to be able to just have a review session and take the time to really reflect on the fruits of the mentoring relationship, really. Also ask them for some feedback, you know, as a mentor, what would they have liked you to have done differently, and what might have worked even better. Would they be willing to give you a testimonial? And if they were, update your profile. You might also find that, you know, when you've concluded a mentoring relationship, actually you've learned something new as well anyway as you conclude it, and you start to realize you've got additional expertise or additional experience that may be relevant. Let the CUBO team know so that they're aware that the relationship is finished, and also tell them if you'd be open and how soon for another mentoring relationship. Well, let's hear from Melissa, who's also thought a little bit about how does she know when the mentoring relationship is done.
I think I laugh and I smile because I never want it to be done. I love a good chat, but that's what it is when it starts to become just a chat.
Yeah.
When you're starting to say, how's life, how's this, and you find that the person isn't bringing anything to you anymore. They're not asking you any questions. You're literally just finding out how their day is, and you're hearing their successes, which is amazing. But you start to realize naturally that they don't need you right now.
And Rebecca.
The easy answer is there's a time frame on it. But I think when you see the person starting to succeed and their confidence is growing and they are reflecting and saying, I don't know why that was a big deal 6 months ago, you know, or I don't know why I couldn't do that now. And now I feel completely confident in doing that. And actually my next challenge is X, Y, and Z. And maybe you're not the person to help them with the next challenge. There's somebody else that you can refer them to, or another mentoring program they can join within CUBO or elsewhere. So I think for me, you got to keep asking questions about how do you feel about that. If you were to measure it on a scale of 1 to 10 compared to when we first spoke about this issue 6 months ago, where would you say you are now? And just, you know, encourage and reflection.
Thank you so much for joining me. All the best.